Okay.
So let me start this saying, first of all, how grateful and excited I am to have this conversation.
Well, that's very kind of you. I'm equally excited. I've been thinking about you a lot. I see some of your, shall we say, posts on
Yeah.
Instagram. Um, and you have a deep voice and talk about really important things and pop, 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 pop. I said, okay, okay, okay. Yeah, this is really good. She's excited. Somehow or other, her internal sense has touched on the external sense, and she's beginning to realize that they're the same. That's where the excitement has to be coming from, and you're like a child learning how to dance in on a cosmic, not on a cosmic stage, but in a cosmic way.
Yeah.
You know. So when I, for instance, if we're going to talk astrology at all, um, when I look at astrology, I look at it from the perspective of quantum physics and the idea that the planets are not physical objects. They
Mm.
are energy fields. Again, Einstein says, it's all energy. There is no such thing as matter. Time, we invented it. Doesn't exist. On a clock, sure. That's as far as it goes. That's all it can do. And you can use it as a method of meeting people. See you at 2 o'clock. Okay. The other coordinate is where. We've got the when and where. So time and all of that is an illusion. But there is the moment, which is all we have. This moment is eternal. And in this moment, things happen. The cosmos is alive and doing things in this, for us, an eternal moment, because we're still relating our lives on a very, very small scale. Let's say our scale is, I think I might live as much as 100 years, tops. The cosmos, as far as we know, is 13 and a half or more billion years old. What we are is a quark kind of thing. Some negative attitudes about the cosmos is that life is an accident. You have to be some kind of fool to believe that. But there are those who say that. So that's part of the external thing, because it's an idea that does not really do anything in the moment, but keep confusion holding us back. And the confusion comes out of the separation, which is an illusion. Einstein said that the idea, our seeing ourselves as separate, is an optical illusion. I mean, I could go on and on about Einstein, but the important thing is these planets are energy fields. So your body is also an energy field. It's very similar to the 8, 9, or 10 energy fields that are going around the solar system. And they're all electromagnetic fields, which the same light is an electromagnetic field.
Yeah.
The solar system is a complicated, organized system of energy fields that make up the living cell called the solar system, which at some point, because your mother, she got this message. The spirit wants to go on a human journey. Create me an earth suit. So I'm looking at the earth suit. There it is. How can I see it? Well, it's an energy field. And when light strikes it, the light that it is able to absorb, or the vibration that is able to absorb, is why I'm able to see you.
Yeah.
But it's all the reflection and the absorption of light. So it's all light. So the whole solar system is infused and centered on the life-giving power of the sun. And so when you really want to know who you are, if you are the solar system, then who you are is the sun. And if you are the sun, why can't you shine? Sociological conditions of liberation are erroneous misunderstandings of who we are, where we are, and why we are. Sociological, political structures that create an environment that is alien to the spirit. And over time, it can beat down the ego structure, which is a social construction by the culture on what it wants you to be. So you struggled against all the things that you were told you had to be, and you always didn't want to be, but at the same time felt if you don't do it, where are you going to be? How are you going to have any relationship? So solar system is this cell within a cosmos, and the cosmos is the closest thing to divinity that you can possibly come across.
The thing that comes to my mind now that you're saying this, one thing that struck me a lot and made me see astrology and especially science in a different way in terms of energy. Well, first it's like, don't you think, like from my personal experience, that once you start a healing and personal spiritual growth journey, it has to start from yourself as me with the ego to then develop slowly into understanding into this journey that we are all and everything, and makes me sound like the journey of the signs, starting with from the first one, which is Aries, which is an energy that represents more individuality and rationalism, so the part of the ego, and then slowly ending up until Pisces, that Pisces represents the energy of like the cosmos, the whole, the spirituality, the alignment. Obviously, correct me if I'm wrong, but it gives me like this sense of like, it's not just about what star sign are you, but
No.
the astrology itself can be used as an example, as a tool to represent a journey into the expansion, as from the ego to the understanding of the cosmos itself at the end of it.
Okay, I understand that. Let me say, from what you said there, I get also an idea that you are thinking that, for instance, what you said about Pisces, cosmic and so forth. There's a personal element to Pisces as well.
Mm.
Pisces, the symbol for it is two little fish. Goes all the way back to biblical interpretations, biblical stories of fishing, where they would catch one fish and another, and then they'd wrap them together so they couldn't flip around. So the symbol with the line and the two fish, these two fish are really different fish, very different states of consciousness. Fish on the right and the fish on the left are different in this way. Let's say when you're looking at the symbol, what you ought to be thinking is this person needs to believe in something. And the problem is that the fish on the right is sitting at the bottom, thinking of itself as like, not really very important or anything. It'll just take whatever it can get from the fish who are controlling the top of the water, and they drip some food down and, I'll get what I can get. The fish on the left says, the hell with that. I'm not going to sit around here and just take what I can get. I have a purpose, man. So the fish is like a salmon. If you're familiar with the salmon life cycle, the salmon is out in the middle of the ocean and gets a message from the species salmon, go home. What? So the salmon, yeah, it does, it finds from its ocean place and finds the fresh water that it came from the smell and the taste, and follows all the way back up to the lake where it was born for the purpose of depositing its eggs to guarantee the next generation of salmon. So the idea is the species, it is the spirit, Pisces, that we all are. And we can sit back and take what we can get, or we can get up and try to preserve and develop and guarantee the next generation of humanity by believing ourselves. But we have to guarantee this generation too. That's where the ego comes in. So the ego is implanted. I'll give you an example of the ego. It's a constructed idea, socially constructed. Out of the sociological, cultural conditions. And the headlights, the two factors that really play the greatest role of a culture is the parents, the mother and the father, who are embedded in that culture, conditioned by that culture, and therefore has a desire.
Yeah.
Culture desire. They have a child, and then the child's supposed to do and be what the culture wants them to be. But when, like you, the child is born with his own sense of life, which all is true. We're all that way. We all have a purpose in being born. See, then the ego is implanted on the psyche of the child in the first 7 to 10 years. And that implantation of the ego on the wall of the psyche is very similar to the same process that the uterus goes through when an egg implants itself on the wall. The uterus, in its intelligence, says, "Woohoo! Look at that! Look at that! Ooh, what is? Oh, I better build some blood vessels and feed it." So the uterus grows the fetus, and the psyche grows the ego. The same way. And the ego becomes the center of consciousness in the same way that an infant becomes the center of consciousness after being born. So the ego is not you. The cosmos is you. But the ego is social conditions about what society says you're supposed to be. So that's those so-called external, see? Outside the ego. Yeah. Ego being what the world says it wants. And it always wants the past. It always wants everything to be just like it always has been.
Yeah.
And you came in with a new idea. Bam, shut up. Don't talk. What makes you think you can blah, blah, blah. So forth. So that ego over time, has to recognize from astrological perspective, the ego has to realize that the ego is a product of the biological entity, not a project of the spirit. So the ego eventually has to undergo a process of transformation, where it's no longer just the culture, but the need of the culture to accept growth, change, and transformation. So the ego transformation can lead to a spiritual awakening. And a spiritual awakening can lead to feelings of going nuts, crazy.
Yeah.
Especially if you are embedded deeply into this thing and you need it for your food and your clothing and all that, and all of a sudden you want to dance in the rain naked. So dance in the rain naked. And then smile at the people who laugh.
Who don't?
Right. Or dance in the rain of the spirit. Let the ego accept the challenges of like being more spiritual. That's okay. Every child has to practice the language is being spoken all around it by copying. Mama, dada, baba. Spirituality. You can't be spirituality, you have to be spiritual. Spirituality is the condition of being spiritual, yeah, but you can't say, I'm going to develop some spirituality. You have to say, well, I'm going to take the moon or my internal sense of self, the ego, and I'm going to dedicate it to the sun, to the spirit, because the sun is the spirit. It's a cell, and the sun, if you look at the cell, the solar system with the sun at the center, and imagine that you're on the sun. Let's just say the sun from a heliocentric perspective. Looking out from the sun, and you see all the planets where they are. And the sun is feeding those planets all the spiritual energy. And the earth is the womb of the solar system.
Okay.
Because all the planets are the organs of the sun, and the earth is the womb. So as life develops on the earth, many thanks to the spirit, the sun, the moon goes around the earth, but the sun is, there's no moon in heliocentric astrology. There are no houses. There's only the spirit descending and feeding us. And this little ego catches in all kinds of little special ways. And we get hung up and caught up in the egos, the moonishness. And we forget, or we don't know, or we need to find out that the spiritual core here is what we have to eventually focus on. Not just the earth, but the sun that feeds it, the spirit that feeds it. But we're living in a situation that is alien to all of that because it's based upon this illusion of matter, material. You wanted to say?
Yeah, in a more like using more a metaphor to explain. So if you said we need to imagine that we are the sun that is feeding the earth, right? In to make it more understandable, maybe with an example to make it clearer, because obviously it's like it can be clear, but also it's very deep into the knowledge of it. Like to make it more approachable, this explanation.
Well, I think what you mean is how does that work in practical terms? Okay, it works the way you see it. You read the headlines. You got a fascist gaining power in Italy. You got one here in America that has been trying to overthrow the government and take everybody into hell as soon as possible. And you got one in Russia who is neo-Nazi, neo-Hitler, thinks he's going to rebuild the Russian Empire.
I mean, in Italy,
You got one in China. You got one like that in China. You got one like that in Brazil. You got one like that in Venezuela. So the world is at a point where this has reached a point of choking it to death. And so there's a need for us to, as a human species, to wake up and change the way we do what we do. But the leaders of the human species are still in the kindergarten. Okay. They're still in a little sandbox. And they think they're hot stuff. So as long as that continues to be the case, where we develop our social political alliances along the lines of how do you say this idea? We are still territorial animals.
Yeah.
Rational though we might be, we're still animals protecting our territories. It's the old tribalism brought into its grandfather called nationalism. It's just big tribalism with big guns instead of big spears. So we haven't changed at all. But we have this huge capacity for technological development, which far exceeds, we're way behind in our own social, spiritual, political reality. We're way behind what we need to be able to be fully responsible for how to handle the technological ability that we have. So we can build a bomb. Does that mean we should? So in your own personal life, I mean, you can make an awful lot of money, let's say. Should you? Does that really go against your spiritual growth, or can they work together? Well, it depends on your goal. Your goal is what? Your purpose. Try to, each day, your purpose can be a little different. So in practical terms, like you want to look at your chart, because you mentioned perhaps you might want to do that. It'd be a
Yeah,
good place to,
yeah, to take as examples, like
yeah, yeah, as an example. You want to share my screen?
Okay. How
I
do
guess you have to give me permission.
you got it?
All right. Um, you're talking about how to be spiritual in a world that limits spirituality to Sunday afternoon or Sunday morning to go to church or religion, all that kind of stuff. But when you look at the astrological configuration of anybody, it always has a starting point, what you would call, when you're talking about Aries, in terms of individuality and all that, and Pisces universality and all that. The Aries point, the beginning, remember the solar system is a living cell within a living cosmos. And so a person's birth is a cosmic act. It's an action of the cosmos done locally through a local sun who has the same job as all the stars in the cosmos, create life. But it doesn't create life just because it feels like it. Does it when, where, how, and why life is needed, under only those reasons. Not because God told me or the devil made me do it. The cosmos creates life because that's what it does, and only under those circumstances. So the Aries point, the beginning, how does that become the beginning? Well, the thing is that the biological entity, which later becomes you, Verena, enters the room, is given birth. Obviously can't breathe. They clear the mucus from the nose and the mouth and whack. It causes the infant to suck in air. So this is the beginning of how it becomes the individual practical, because the air that the infant breathes at that moment is a universal factor. Everything on the earth itself is using the air to survive, grow, and develop.
Yeah.
So the air is the soul of the biosphere. And so the body then, the infant then is one with the earth, the solar system, galaxy, and cosmos, separated only by layers of consciousness. The more conscious you become of yourself as more than this body, the more powerfully you can develop and have more control over the direction of your development. So at the time that the air, the universal factor, the unifying thing, air as an element in astrology is a unifying factor. The air connects us all. Libra relates us all. Aquarius changes us all. At the same time that the air comes in, so do you. Your spiritual DNA, the solar system, enters this biological entity, also a product of the solar system. At the time that is rising at that point, what is rising is Virgo. Well, that's the beginning of your path, your Aries point. So the cosmos has a desire. Mars, Aries, beginning, new, Aries point, a desire, a purpose, a want. The cosmos wants something to do with Virgo. Well, it wants to be able to survive withering criticism, because Virgo is divided into 3 sections. It's Earth as an element. Earth is what generates value in Taurus, concentrates that value in Virgo. So Virgo is a concentrated sense of the need to help grow, develop, and psychologically feel good enough.
Yeah.
Able, willing, got it. But the middle part of Virgo is Capricorn. The two of these things, Capricorn and Virgo, are both supremely capable of withering criticism. Does that mean your personality is a critical personality? Being nasty all the time and criticizing everybody? No. It means that on your path in life, your orientation toward life, the criticism is going to come from the culture you were born in, from the mother and the father. Well, maybe not the father, he's not there. And that's the way he's influencing you, by not being there. Father, Saturn image, father. So you see what I'm saying? Here is the spirit entering the body. And suddenly the body is the only thing that's happening. And is pitter-pattering around the floor. 1-year-old finally responded to the name Verena. Oh, 8 months, 9 months. Now you are Verena all of a sudden. But are you? No. You are being addressed and treated and related to using that label. So you know they're talking about you, whatever that means to you as an infant. Doesn't mean much. It just means scared. Oh God, were you scared? Because all you wanted to do is get out of there. You, the spirit in that biological entity. So the criticism, Virgo, the Capricorn part of Virgo, means I'm going to have to take this Capricorn part of Virgo and go to the Capricorn house number 10. There I find the issue, Chiron, a wounding, a hurt. It starts from childhood.
So just to be clear on this, Chiron, the part of Chiron represents the wounded part of the spirit, right?
No.
No. Okay.
It's a wounding that is inflicted upon
Okay. All right.
the biological entity in terms of its Gemini, in terms of its understanding of itself. Your own understanding of yourself is wounded, is hurt. The way you think about yourself was hurt and wounded as a child. A little side trip. All this stuff is retrograde except this Pluto, which is stationary. I would have to look and see whether it's stationary direct or stationary retrograde. When you have all this retrograde in the lower half of the chart, this is the subjective reality. The first, it's a 28-year cycle. The first 14 years is your personal psychological development.
And that's for everybody, right?
That's for everybody.
Okay. It's
The lower
14
half.
first quarter and then 14, so
The
it's
lower, yeah, the lower half of the chart is the subjective, and the upper is the objective. This is subjective development because we have endurance, we have change and transformation that we think takes place over time. Well, maybe if you want to use time for something, but it's a process of development. And in your subjective development, you have to really grant yourself a whole lot of credit because you are, when you have retrograde planets, it's like operating without them.
okay.
So internally, it took a long time for you to even feel your inner self.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you did, it hurt. And so you've done what you can to stay away from that inner pain as long as possible. Because Chiron is, sure, it's listed in the books as the wounded warrior, the wounded healer. Yeah. But what's the purpose? Everything in life does have a purpose. Life is its own purpose. But there are things that life does that has a purpose. And people get confused. What is the purpose of my life? To live it. That's the purpose of your life. But in the course of living your life, there are certain choices that you need to make. So when it comes to you having some kind of career, relationship to society, your internal sense of self is so conflicted, so fearful that you might not be good enough.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I say fearful because on the cusp, the houses, okay, 12 departments of life. Third house is the department of life called how do I think of stuff, including me? What is the quality of my thought? Well, the cusp, the clothing, the lipstick that it wears is Scorpio. The Scorpio says, yeah, okay, I'm scared. I'm fearful mentally. But I'm a healer, and I know because Scorpio is fundamentally the healing energy of our solar system. Scorpio.
Okay.
But see, now Scorpio is also made up of three parts. They're all water, not the kind you drink, but the kind is fluidity of feeling, emotion, and so forth. The middle part of Scorpio is Pisces, the emotion of being one and believing in oneself, the self that is the solar system, which the biological entity can say, oh, I'm riding like a surfer on the ocean wave of the cosmos, heading to shore, call home, death, life, rebirth. But Scorpio, as healing, also says, well, I got to go find out what needs to be healed. In your mind, your everyday third house, there's a need for you to go find what needs to be healed for you to be able to have a character that has a sense of direction.
Yeah.
Said Saturn and Sagittarius. Go find Scorpio, the eighth sign, eighth house, and here what we have is what needs to be healed. What is weak? Very simple. You've struggled with your sense of validity. How can I be this valid Can I be valid, do this? Is this really, am I really capable of doing this? And Pisces part says, I don't know. I don't know. It's really scary. From the perspective of the subjective, you start with Virgo, and Virgo in the middle part does point to this Chiron, this wounding in the Gemini portion of the air signs, the air signs that start with Gemini always refer to the need to resolve the conflict. Because Gemini in the books is like the twins and all that, but well, they're not twins. They're night and day, black and white, yin and yang. They have to learn to cooperate. But since they're so different, they don't like each other. And the wounding is to the ego, which is developed in the first 7 years out of the cultural conditioning.
Yeah.
So the culture, the fourth house, the department of life called the family background, the cusp of that is in Sagittarius, which is cool because, well, gee, wow. Seems like they were pretty forward-thinking people back then. No, they were just banging you around. They were shoving you around, shutting you up, being angry at you. Always coming across this idea that you are so weird, Verena. I don't want to hear any more of this stuff. So at the foundation level, the cusp of the fourth house is Uranus saying, look, Verena, she looks at Verena Saturn, says, why are you going to isolate yourself behind this idea that you're not very smart? That's the cultural idea of what a woman is supposed to be.
Yeah.
You're supposed to be underneath the thumb of a man. And there you are, growing up, getting towards puberty, and you're acting like a dude. You're acting like you know what you're doing. You really don't. You're just trying to figure out how to get out of there. So your power, Mars, is hung up in the Taurus part of Capricorn. It's like my power, my ambition, my capacity to act is retrograde. I don't have it. Why? Because it's in Taurus. I'm not valuable enough. What you have felt about yourself for a long time is something that meant you better hide. Better not let anybody really see into you too deep.
Yeah.
But then one day over the last 3 or 4 years, you looked a little into yourself a little too deep, just deep enough to realize that you can't do that anymore. I mean, what are you going to do when you see the sunrise? Jump into bed, pretend it's night? No, you had to get up and dance.
In this that you were speaking, yeah, because like this is meant to just show how this works itself, like a birth chart, how much you can find out for yourself to use into your personal development. Because for me, what I learned and what I was able through you on the first birth chart reading that you gave me. And I remember that me and you spoke about it, that people come to you, it's like, when am I gonna find love? When am I gonna do this? Like, how much do you bring, or do you wanna say that the astrology, not just yourself, the birth chart reading, but the astrology is a tool not used to, as I said before, live on the outside. When am I gonna find love? When is my career gonna go good, be good, and all of that? But using as a tool for one personal journey and understanding the reasons and the path in this human experience. So what was interesting for me is understanding as well in these years, because we see, oh, what star sign are you? Oh, I'm not compatible with you. Me and you spoke about it, and it's like, for me, I have this conversation with people. It's like, what sign I'm not compatible with? I'm like, you can be compatible and non-compatible with whoever you choose to be compatible or not. It's not in terms of sign, but in terms of how much a person develop and is able to see the other not as compatible or not, but it comes from within you and how developed you are.
Well, see, the issue of compatibility is really just a code word.
Yeah.
Compatibility. It's a code. What does compatibility mean? Well, we get along. He loves me. We feed each other love and all that. Yeah. But what is really making that possible is not the sign, sun signs, or the planets, or anything else. It has to do with the individual subjective development
Mm-hmm.
prior to entering the relationship. If you're born into a situation in the first 14, 15 years of your life, you feel like you are not being loved or cared for, or that you have been made to feel like you don't matter. The whole of your life for the next 28 years is going to be consumed by trying to have a relationship where this other person is going to say, you are good. That is the same thing as saying, here's the key to my house. Take what you want.
Yes.
Giving your power away. The power of self love is what you have to try to achieve. Self love, not the power, but self love.
Mm-hmm.
Loving self. Loving, trusting, feeling that no matter how good or bad you're able to achieve one or another skill in life, it's got nothing to do with why you love or don't love yourself. Why you don't do or don't love yourself is because how you were loved as a child. So that affects all the relationships because you go looking for love. And instead of getting love, what happens is that you're looking for love so much that you will do whatever they want in
Yeah.
order to get them to say, I like you, I love you. So that subjective development that we're talking about is really based upon self love, self confidence, self knowledge, self awareness, awakening. And if you're awake, you don't need somebody to tell you you're good looking, fabulous, wonderful, great
Mm-hmm.
mom, great this, great that. You know that. You know that you could do things and do it in a way that doesn't work. You know you could do all that, but you also know that you're not going to cling to somebody else to try to feel good about yourself.
Yeah.
So that becomes the process of spiritual awakening, which is a feeling of being separated out. You're not part of the culture anymore. So if you can't get a good relationship because you don't love yourself and you can't find someone who can make you feel loved, then you're far further and further away from awakening your own spiritual growth and development.
Mm-hmm.
There is no necessary guarantee that what you have to achieve in any given life, this deep, very vaunted spiritual thing called spiritual awakening. Some of us have to stay a little asleep most of the time just to
Yeah.
fulfill our life purpose.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Now, at the very foundation, whatever planet you find down there, if there is one, in this case, there is one called Uranus. Now, here's this difference between the individual and the collective. Saturn and Uranus, those two planets, they have an affinity or we call rulership of the sign of Aquarius. They make up Aquarius. Saturn, the past, Uranus, the future. Saturn, the individual, and Uranus, what the individual is a part of. So you as an individual are part of a process going on in the world that says it's time for transformation in the way we behave and in our actions as humans. Change, Uranus, from the past, Saturn, the old religion, Sagittarian religion, God, woman, rib of man, friend, partner, helper, women, under the thumb of the patriarchy.
Mm-hmm.
Saturn, the patriarchy. That's what has affected your growing up years. Slapped you around because, well, you're just a woman. What are you supposed to be able to do anyway? You're a woman. You know what your role in life is supposed to be. But Verena says, I don't want that. She gets in trouble with herself too because she had been so afraid of that she hid from herself, Pluto and Scorpio. But the idea is Pluto says, I'm here to get rid of everything that is bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't do it by anger and frustration. I have to do it by replacing, eliminating the weakness of not feeling valid. I have to revive my validity. I have to come out of the social cultural hell of my family background and the culture of the way the world is being run. And I got to somehow or other put some effort into finding my way forward out of there. Because the North Node is the challenge, the destiny.
So what comes to me to ask about the birth chart? Because it looks like everything is kind of already written.
Already what?
Written.
Written?
Of your story, of your life.
No.
Because that's what could make think of it.
No. I know exactly what you're saying. The common misunderstanding of astrology is that it's predestined.
Yeah.
And boy, when you're sitting there in that jail cell and you believe that we're predestined to be there, as much as that is not true, in the sense that is intended here by those people who want to put astrology into some bag of worthlessness, spiritually, the cosmos, acting locally, has this desire to enter into this biological entity and experience what that biological entity is experiencing. And there is a destiny that says, well, during that biological development, under a withering criticism, there's going to be a resource available here based upon the idea you need to change the system of how you value yourself. If you compare yourself to the way the culture, the social standards, the Libra consciousness says, social conformity, if you value yourself that way, you're worthless, man. If you don't do what a woman's supposed to do, you're worthless. You're out of your board. The idea of the middle part of Libra, ruled by Venus, the Aquarius part of Libra, change the value that you use as a resource. If you're going to be criticized by your family, then you go from 0 to 28, and at 28, you're still criticizing yourself. You've taken your parents' place. You're doing it for them. You're so used to being criticized, and criticizing yourself becomes like, right-handedness or left-handedness is the way you do things. You always look for what could go wrong. And of course, when you're looking for what could go wrong, well, that's the first thing that went wrong. Why don't you look for what could go right? What might you actually be able to do in terms of having a different set of values? Well, you could let go, self know, of the Gemini part of Libra, the wounding. You could look at the wounding and say, oh, that hurt stimulated me to develop an inner strength.
Yeah, because
That's what happened.
that's one thing that I realized with the time and my personal development with astrology. It's not just about getting to know yourself, but seeing that your challenges that are present into your life that you can see in your birth chart are actually the tool for your development.
Yeah, yes. But you have to be um, conscious enough to use them.
Yeah, because interesting to me was like because we always think in the common sense of horoscopes or signs that the rising sign is part of that something that defines you. They say that your sun sign is who you are internally, the rising sign is how you're perceived by people. But for me, it was also an understanding that my rising sign being Virgo and me spending all my life being I hate routine, I hate details and all of that. For me, the challenge was embracing this Virgo part and creating a routine in my life and looking at details of what I create. And that challenge to implement that into me was going to be a tool to improve myself and my development and my expansion.
But you have to use it for
Yes,
that purpose.
but for me, it was like because it was always something that I like growing up. For me, I hate routine, I hate this, and I hate that. But like the Virgo rising was the challenge was implementing that routine. That actually, once I went over the challenge and implemented routine and details in my life, that was the challenge in my life that I needed to overcome and implement it for my own best and development and expansion. So that's what I want to make people that look at this understand how the rising sign and knowing it can help in your personal development. And it's just not about the definition of who you are, but the challenges that comes within your chart. That if you take them on in your life and you use that in your own benefit, they can empower you and not look at them as a challenge like, oh no, this is difficult. Make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's perfectly all right. It's perfectly right. But I have to say something about the idea of the rising sign being this thing.
Yeah,
Um,
please.
in astrology, there is no such thing as a definition
Mm-hmm.
that the rising sign always means this. All of the images that astrology uses for planets, signs, risings, houses, and all that are archetypes. There are a lot of ways in which Virgo can manifest. You might have wanted to be a nurse. You might have wanted to be a bookkeeper. You might have wanted to hide in a corner because you're so bad at anything that you can't accomplish anything. So you're using Virgo as self esteem negativity. You can use Virgo as an example of perfection, and I have to achieve this perfection, and only find that that's impossible because perfection doesn't exist.
That was one of my
That was your big deal.
yes.
So there you kept trying, and you were there. You have it perfect, and the report card comes back. No, you're not perfect. Not yet. You still. All it means is that the biological entity, the psychological entity, need to change into the spirit as its primary identity. Your body, your biological entity, has to identify itself as the cosmos in a very practical way by entering on a path of service. Virgo. To Capricorn, on? Service to society. Yeah, not slavery. But when you don't get love growing up in the first 14 years, then the next 14 years is you constantly trying to find love, get love, because you're so full of it yourself. You have so much to give, you don't know where it's coming from. So your relationships, 7th through the 12th, the amount of love that you can engage in depends upon how high your consciousness of your value is. Sagittarius is the overview, higher mind, the big sister looking at the little sister, their everyday mind, Mercury.
Mm-hmm.
Mercury, starts happening right here because Virgo rules. Mercury rules Virgo. And Virgo also, well, Mercury also rules the 3rd house. So mind, mind, mind. 3 stages of mind. What is mind? Mind is the psyche that begins to have a center of consciousness called the ego. And the ego is the moon. But the moon and the ego are under the threat of death. The ego knows the moon is in the part of Libra that goes from Libra to Aquarius to Gemini. I have to kill this conflict. I have to resolve this conflict. I have to get rid of everything that's obsolete about my own sense of validity. I'm here to serve, to transmit knowledge, energy, and love to the rest of the world. However I do it. The higher mind says, well, I'm the higher mind, and I'm looking here where the lower mind started out with this idea that it isn't good enough, needs to really heal and revive faith in itself. And psychologically, well, it needs to change the values that it uses to psychologically have a sense of belonging. If it does that, then it has a higher mind. Pisces, Cancer, Scorpio. Oh, now I can really heal my sense of being a healer. What does it really mean, expanding? Becoming more light in your being.
Mm-hmm.
The expanding is the knowledge of self.
More whole.
And the self is, of course, the solar system, but let's not call it the solar system. Let's call it you. Transforming and changing its own sense of duty and obligation, self-worth. I belong, it says, to the revolutionary group of people who are making, of course, his 11th sign, 11th house, making revolutionary changes in society. And there's your sun. There's your consciousness shining down on the earth that you are. And the Mercury is retrograde, saying, I want to go back and look at this more carefully, the Mercury says, because it's retrograde. Sure, I'm not sure I should think the way I normally think about my Leo validity. It has to change. How does it have to change? Well, it's the 11th house of change. It has to go back here and communicate the will, the consciousness. Going back, and what it finds is the will is in the part of Cancer that is Pisces. It says you really have to feel and be independent in all of your beliefs. Believe in yourself independently from everything that's ever happened to you. It didn't happen to you, it happened to your ego.
And there are people that are born in a space, culture, and family, whatever, that they are comfortable with it and they live their whole life with that. They don't need to just change it.
Well, it depends what you think you're changing. I mean, the only thing that really needs change It's the growth in your conscious awareness of your real spiritual being. Beware of self. And the ego being the point of consciousness, centralized you have consciousness, spirit. And the ego has this point of reference, the me. It's not really you, it's this cultural conditioning you. It's the culture that gives itself to you and says, here, be this way. And the ego says, I can't be that way. Moon runs into Pluto. I have to eliminate all of that stuff because I'm here to believe. My conscience has to believe in itself. And so my validity comes only from my believing that I'm here as an energy being devoted to revolutionary change and transformation.
And do you believe that, in the especially spiritual journey of everybody, there's this saying of the death of the ego? Do you think that there must be, or there should be, a death of the ego, or somehow some part of the ego is useful in a way in this human experience?
The whole of the ego is useful in this human experience. The ego is not something that you need to kill. It's something that you, the spirit, need to use for a while to see what it's doing. You become aware of it, and then to transform it. Say, look, Spirit says to Mr. Ego, Miss Ego, says, hey, look, spiritually, the department of life that I'm functioning in is revolutionary change and transformation. Okay, Ego, line up because you're part of what's going to have to be transformed. And the ego is the information about what is wrong in society, the condition of sociological reality. And your conscience says, well, that's all under reconstruction. So don't hang your hat, ego, on what the culture said you are, because it's not true. So the transformation of the ego, a center of consciousness, into a servant of the spirit, servant of the sun, a manifester of the solar will.
It's more like not the death of the ego, but connecting, as you said, to your spirit, and use the ego as a tool, not having the ego controlling the spirit.
Yeah, the ego can't control the spirit. It can only block your biological entity from understanding it, feeling it, knowing it, so forth.
So, I mean, I would go on and on and on about all astrology and everything that can help people with in a magnificent, beautiful way. But I don't want to take away too much of your time. What would you say?
It's okay. I have time. Don't worry.
What is okay? Let me start with this question. For me, what's so fascinating about you, the fact that you started to study astrology with the purpose of proving that everything was bullshit. And you find yourself, for me, it's fascinating because that means there's even more studying to it to prove something opposite. And then you found yourself of seeing this as as real, as that you became an astrologer and used it to also help other people.
Well, when it's like the way a child learns a language, learns to speak. It's mimicking. A child will mimic the parents words and so forth and so on. And don't really know what they mean, but mimicking. So when you're first really learning astrology, you're just mimicking. You're just saying what other people say, saying what the books say. But that's not knowledge yet. I have a person that I worked with in the past who has all of the capacity to be a brilliant astrologer. But he keeps getting hung up on simply repeating the keywords.
Yeah.
Oh, you have Scorpio, life, death, rebirth on the third house, and so forth and so on. So you're afraid of dying. Well, who isn't? So you got to go as you see this language development. The planets are like the words in a sentence. So the first word in your sentence is let go of those values that are conflicting with your real value, which is different than everyone else in the world, because you're about tomorrow, not yesterday.
My beautiful souls, thank you so much for watching this first episode. Just remember to subscribe to this channel because there is so much medicine, so many tools, so many professionals and healers that I will bring to you to bring you the tools for your personal growth, your personal development, connecting to yourself and really understanding your worth and your value to create beauty and abundance in your life. So if you like this video, I know it's a lot of information, but when you assimilate that, it's gonna be very useful for your soul. Press like if you like this video. If you're on the podcast, then subscribe or follow or just leave a review, because the more energy you give me back, the more energy I can receive to bring you more and more of what you need. Thank you so much. Don't forget to subscribe. I love you very much. And if you have any questions, just leave it down here on the comments. And just remember, if you're interested in booking a reading with Ray or booking with me for your personal transformation and development, connecting to your worth and be able to express your authenticity unapologetically without feeling guilt anymore, without depending on other people's